Hi everyone, welcome. I'm just out here looking at my outdoor worm bin, and something we see sometimes is a little bit of like an excavation done by some sort of local critters. They sometimes find a spot where they can kind of reach their little paws in around the edge of this thing and pull out a little something, and I saw signs of this already from a distance, but I didn't look very closely, and it was just now that I actually noticed that, I don't know, whatever critter it is that decided to come check this out really kind of went above and beyond any previous attempts I've seen of them trying to get in here. It looks to me like this was all gnawed off, kind of chewed away significantly. So I mean, at no point did we ever have a hole like that on the side of my outdoor worm bag, version 4.0 as I call it this year. But well, I guess we now get to assess the impact of this little invasion together, because I waited about 12 days now since the last time we checked in here, and they got a feeding that I don't know, it's kind of one of those types of foods that you don't expect to last very long in a worm bin. It was pumpkin, and I've got a lot of pumpkin right now. So as no surprise, what they're getting today is almost an identical portion of the same. Again, more pumpkin. And I even got a little care package of paper bedding from the basement like I had last week, even a little bit of grit to give them. So let's see, I guess this is the area of question, I suppose. So I'm assuming that they gnawed that hole just big enough that they could reach their paw in, that, you know, because all I see is what maybe goes down about this deep, and it seems like the only stuff missing is what might be reachable by a little arm about this big to scoop out whatever they could to check it out, and then maybe in the end realize that what they had scooped out didn't seem to, I don't know, be of enough interest to keep going or to try further to get into the system anymore. They could probably smell food items. They might be able to smell all the worms living in here. So I'm just guessing that, you know, this is kind of like a probably a really tempting you think about all the creatures that would love to get their little claws and beaks and whatever, get themselves access to what lives in this thing or gets placed into this thing from time to time. I'm sure there's probably a lot of interest from the perspective of hungry little critters. You know, I got the top covering. Why don't we just get this bedding material that was sort of floating out here on the surface out of the way? But I like the idea of keeping it all easily accessible and together. I'm just going to place it up onto this, and we're going to get it out of our way so we could do a more thorough inspection of how this system's coming along here. I fed pumpkin last time, but at the last check-in we also found some leftovers of some of the previous feedings. I remember chunks of pepper, a number of pieces of pepper, and then other leftovers that go back even older, like this right here is the pepper bits, surprisingly looking very much the way they did 12 days ago during the last check-in. And these things go back to who knows when. We're now at feeding 20, and the age of this system as of today is 250 days. A whole bunch of really easy numbers for me to remember as part of the reason I thought it might be nice to come out here today and shoot, because it was not only such a nice day, it was a bunch of numbers that were really easy to remember too. I mean, this being the 20th feeding wouldn't have changed much regardless of when I fed, but today being the 250th day of this system being in service, it seemed like a nice round easy number for me to go with. So here's this little thing that grew wild in my garden. One of the volunteer plants that started growing was a little melon, I believe cantaloupe melon, and it had never gotten breached, and I finally poked my thumb through it by accident last week, making this little hole on the side, which made me think that that thing would get attacked, that it would just get gobbled up by the worms 1, 2, 3, but it looks like it's hardly even taken on any interest yet. Maybe because they got a whole bunch of pumpkin, and look at that, even this pumpkin is sitting here as leftovers too. Huh, interesting. Well, I don't know. Times like this, it makes you question whether you want to put in more food or take what you have for them and bring it back into the freezer. But I don't know. I think you guys know my tendency is to, you know, go with it if possible. And at this point, it just seems like it would be a shame to take all this delicious food and take it back to the freezer. I'm just going to try to figure out a good way to give it to them. But you know what? Let's let them settle in for a moment while I think this through. But I think we've got a pretty good sized hole that we might be able to drop today's feeding into. I was looking for a place to try to wipe off my hand that I try to keep clean generally, and I reached over for one of these leaves in that pile of leaves and crabgrass that we set aside a moment ago, and then it hit me. That right there, I think, would be the ideal material to use as the bedding to drop down into this hole. So instead of having all that awesome stuff just floating out on the top surface, it'll become the foundation for today's feeding. I like that idea. And it'll give that stuff a much better purpose than just resting out on the top of this. And I think it'll give us a medium into which all that fresh food we're adding today is going to easily fit. So maybe we lay in a little bit of leaves and throw in some of the old food, and then throw in some more leaves and grass, and then maybe pop in some of the new food. I've even got like that little batch of fresh paper bedding material that I bought from downstairs too. I mixed a little bit of grit into it as well. So a little bit of kind of boutique bedding for these little guys as a treat, since they usually only get leaves and grass and stuff like that. Just a little collection of shredded paper, and in here is the grit that I bought for them too. But you know what? Let's bring that in as a later layer. Let's first bring in some of this stuff here. I mean, I'm just thinking almost all of it at this point, right? Just gonna grab the majority of it, save a little bit to try to cover with or to create a second layer with momentarily. And you know, these little guys, they're out here in the cold anyway. For me to take a bunch of frozen pumpkin and dump it onto them, it seems a little, I don't know. Well, you know, this material that we just plopped in here doesn't seem like it's got any worms in it. But you know what, this is going to be our chance to be courteous, lay down a little layer of insulation onto which the frozen stuff can get positioned, and then since we just saw that the material that we scraped off the top surface is pretty much free of any worms, we could probably just use that to cover up with a little bit here, so that the frozen stuff is once again encapsulated inside of a layer of stuff. But you know what, got to keep a little hole here down in the middle, because we've not yet returned any of this old leftovers. So let's make sure all these leftovers are all returned to the feeding area. Some of this bedding material from the last go around, this must have been what I had bought down the bedding in. I bought some shredded bedding down just like this last time in a piece of newspaper, and then that newspaper went in here as extra bedding again. That's what this stuff here is. And then I think we could probably cover up. So let's let these little guys once again settle down into the material. I'm sure they don't like being out here in the bright lights. And then we could really get the system covered up and we'll be finished. You know, it seems so funny. You can't hear it now because they're not chirping at all. Just a moment ago when we first had that last little bundle of worms kind of getting themselves situated and settling in, I'm pretty sure I heard a bunch of little birdies overhead making a real racket. as if they were talking about, you know, hey, look what's over there, big huge pile of worms, oh my goodness, if that guy wasn't there we could go feast on them. I mean, seems like a realistic thing in the presence of a big pile of worms right there out in the middle of the yard. The only problem is the big human in the way. Otherwise they probably would have come over. Maybe I should have just walked away. I don't know, I kept thinking to myself how all of this nice leafy material and grass and bedding type stuff would do so much better if it was submerged down within the bed. So instead of just leaving it out on the top, as nice as it looks to come back into a system with some nice top covering leaves and this and that, seems to me if we get that stuff submerged a little bit, kind of blend it all in, then it's all going to become additional stuff for the worms to nibble on or to adopt as their bedding or whatever. Oh, sounds like we've got a guy in the neighboring yard operating a leaf blower or something. It wasn't quite so loud before. Perhaps they just turned the corner and have come out from behind something that was blocking the sound a little bit, but we're done here anyway. Not much more to be done other than make sure we don't have any wormies hitchhiking on our gloves. Make sure they all get left here within the system, and then we can cover up. Let's bring back the cardboard covering, which oddly enough has been holding up pretty good. A lot of time these cardboard coverings get nibbled on quite heavily by the worms hanging out right beneath it, but maybe the worms aren't so interested in being right beneath this stuff these days. Maybe they're more interested in being down low where it's not quite so chilly. I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't blame them for wanting to huddle together, and this might be a nice thing too, is we took all that nice vast amount of bedding material, kind of consolidated it down into the middle, and I guess the stuff on the outer rim now is more, you know, heavily broken down material with some of that fresh stuff, with some of that leafy material all blended into it as well. But I keep thinking, you know, with the cooler temperatures rolling in, it would be nice to keep them in an environment where they could really kind of huddle together, keep each other warm, and have plenty of fresh bedding and food and everything down there to enjoy while they're there. So at some point I think I'll be bringing these guys into the abandoned stairwell I've got off on the side of the house. But right now there's not a lot of real freezing temperatures in the forecast, so I think they'll be all right out here for a little while longer. But that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did at all, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye now.